Hello everyone! Today I wanted to share with you a video that I recently saw on Jeranism's channel. You can find Jeran's review here, and I want to thank him for sharing it. I edited the video and shortened it. The original video was produced by this website, richplanet TV. I'll have a link to the website where you can go and purchase the content. As far as I can tell, the original author seems to still mistakenly believe in the globe. But I think you'll enjoy this analysis of the fake moon landings, and pretty much all of us started with the one small step of the fake moon landings before being able to see the Earth is indeed flat. The video is about a professional analysis made by Peter Hyatt of a Neil Armstrong interview. You can read more about Peter Hyatt here on his website. But Mr. Hyatt was a firm believer in the moon landings before performing this analysis. And it looks like he changed his mind. According to the website, Peter Hyatt is a statement analyst and instructor who teaches statement analysis and analytical interviewing to law enforcement and corporate America. Essentially, Peter Hyatt is a professional at determining deception in language, and I find it fascinating. In this case, Rich Planet TV paid Peter Hyatt to analyze an old 7-minute interview by Neil Armstrong. I've talked about this Neil Armstrong interview several times on my channel because Neil Armstrong said that one could not see the stars in the space between the Earth and the Moon, which entirely contradicts the claims of other astronauts. Let's watch.
The sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon.
And when you're in space and you're looking into deep space and you're on the sun side of the orbit, the sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth. But then when you look out into deep space away from the sun, it's the darkest black you can imagine.
Says you can see the stars.
Oh yeah.
You know, and pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
Yeah. It's a blatant contradiction, and it clearly evinces that astronauts are liars. But in this video, Peter Hyatt analyzes whether Neil's statements in the interview indicate deception. Now, the analysis by Peter Hyatt is in writing, and Rich Planet TV will quote from the written analysis at the relevant part of the interview. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. I have discussed the moon landings on previous shows, and this subject can be a very hot potato. Whatever your opinion is on whether in 1969 Neil Armstrong walked on the lunar surface or not, I think you will be very interested to see the evidence and analysis put forward in today's show. In fact, I will go as far as to say if you are currently on the fence, today's show will probably get you off the fence.
The average person has a vocabulary of about 20,000 words. When you ask someone what happened, they must go into that vocabulary, decide what words to use out of the 20,000, where to order them, what verb tenses to use, what pronouns to use, where to place each word next to each other to communicate in less than a microsecond of time. That is a process that, when disrupted by deception, we catch. When someone uses an unnecessary word, unnecessary phrase, unnecessary detail, we deem it as doubly important. And when you ask them what happened, they must go into their memory, and when experiential memory speaks, it is very smooth and it goes in chronological order. A lie will disrupt that, and that causes internal stress. So people say, well, sociopaths don't feel stressed when they're lying. That's not true. They feel very stressed when they're lying because they don't want to be caught. So to disrupt that process is very stressful, and those that are really good at lying will use a substitute of words. So one of the things they'll do, instead of saying, I did not use performance-enhancing drugs, they say, I never used performance-enhancing drugs. I would never. And what they're doing is they're actually distancing themselves from an actual denial.
So I selected a 7-minute long Neil Armstrong interview from 1970, transcribed it, and I've asked Peter to analyze it, which he's done. Cost me $275 for the analysis. So that's what you've paid for, essentially, by coming here. So So this interview aired on the Sky at Night on the 18th of November 1970, which is less than a year and a half after the moon landings. So everything should be pretty clear in Neil Armstrong's mind. So what you're going to see here is a very short clip of the interview, followed by Peter Hyatt's analysis, then another clip, and then more analysis. So although it's only a 7-minute long interview, probably take me 20, 25 minutes to get through the analysis. So here goes.
Mr. Armstrong, I do realize that when you were on the moon, you had very little time for gazing upwards. But could you tell us something about what the sky actually looks like from the moon, the sun, the earth, the stars, if any, and so on?
The sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon.
We note and as pauses in the answer and seek to determine if this is a habit of speech or if it is a signal that the subject needs more time to consider his answer. That he began with "the sky is deep black" indicates a willingness to answer the question directly. This is a somewhat lengthy answer which begins with 2 pauses for thought. The subject is presupposed to have been on the moon, something of great rarity at the time of this interview. The subject is intelligent and well trained. The expectation is that he will, according to the wording of the question, report what he himself saw. In any singular or exclusive event, there is an expectation of heightened importance, and when we speak from experiential memory, the structure of the sentence is reliable. Expected. Given the unique experience of being on the moon, we first note that the subject does not begin his answer with the pronoun I. In analysis, this reduces reliability. Given the context of unique experience, the pronoun I would have shown the psychological strength of experiential memory. Its absence is noted. Even with influence from the interviewer, the expectation is the experiential use of I saw in some part of the answer. Next, we note the use of passive voice with "when viewed from the moon." Passive voice removes the subject himself personally from the statement. The use of passivity is found in concealing identity and/or responsibility in statements. For example, "the gun went off" is passive voice. If the subject was in a crowd and did not know who fired the gun, this would be appropriate. Here, the subject is describing a universal viewing and avoiding the singular experience that is expected. Next, "when viewed from cislunar space," the space between the Earth and the moon. This is similar to the universal pronoun you that is used to describe a common experience. This leads to a question. Is viewing the space between the Earth and the moon a common experience that listeners would readily relate to?
The Earth is the only visible object other than the sun that can be seen, although there have been some reports of seeing planets.
This is his second sentence after reporting in both passive and universal language. He tells us in general terms what you, universal unnamed, can know, similar to what would be reported in a textbook. Please note the inclusion of "some reports." He has thus far avoided giving us personal experience that is highly expected in such an event. This is an indication of avoidance of the response. There is no linguistic connection here between the subject and experiential language at this point. The rule of the negative. Truthful people tell us what they saw, heard, and experienced. When one tells us what they did not see, a la part 1, or hear or experience, the analyst recognizes that this sentence increases in importance.
I myself did not see planets from the surface, but I suspect they might be visible.
Here we not only have the rule of the negative, but we have the unnecessary addition of the word "myself." Since he experienced something highly unique, not only does he report what he did not see, but he feels it necessary to input himself into the sentence where no such imputation should be needed. Who else would be answering this question, or not seeing what he did not see? He offers a weak assertion: "I suspect they might be visible," appropriately matching "might" with "suspect." Being that he has thus far not told us what he has seen, it is interesting to note the inclusion of the word "suspect." What other word might he have chosen? "I think they might be visible" would be an appropriately weak assertion where one lacks certainty. The word "think" is the most commonly chosen. Therefore, we note the use of "suspect" or "suspicion" within his vocabulary in context of his answer. We continue to wait to hear him tell us what he saw.
The Earth is quite beautiful from space and from the Moon. It looks quite small and quite remote, but it's very blue and covered with white lace of the clouds, and the continents are clearly seen, although they have very little color from that distance.
Okay, this is just an aside from myself. He said that from the Moon, the Earth looks very small and remote. Now, the Earth is 4 times the diameter of the Moon, and we're all used to seeing the Moon in the sky and how big it is. So if you were to see something that big in the sky, would you call it small and remote? Here we have more sensory description, but we have not heard him tell us what he himself saw. The description is strong, but is not yet connected to the subject. This could come from him, or it could come from a book, or another's opinion. With such a stupendous history-making event, we expect to hear up-close personal language. Thus far, we have not.
What about the sun? Could you see any trace of the corona?
No, the glare from the sun on the helmet visor was too difficult to pick out the corona.
Here he says no, which answers the question, but then continues to avoid personal linguistic connection, such as, no, the glare of the sun on my helmet visor was too difficult for me to pick out the corona. This would have been a statement of personal connection, which he has not yet made. Remember, he was asked, did you? With the focus upon himself. He should answer for himself.
The only time we could see the corona was during an eclipse of the sun from the Moon. That is, when we were flying through the Moon's shadow and could observe the solar corona peeking out from behind the Moon.
Even if he said the only time I could see was when we were flying, which would fulfill the personal, impactful event on self while sharing we when flying. Stronger is what I saw rather than we. The pronoun we could be produced if he and at least one other discussed this specific topic. Still, given the nature of a most unique and overwhelming event, the expectation remains. He should be using I and past tense verbs in correlation with sensory description. Please consider that given the spectacular and unique privilege of what he experienced, the pronoun me may be used in a desire not to claim any glory or credit for himself. This may be an indication of team over individual. Even with this accepted, we continue to expect him to at some point tell us what he experienced. Thus far, he has not. When the pronoun we is used consistently, we look for the first emergence of the pronoun I and conclude that the sentence containing it is very important.
Looking at the photographs that you brought back, the coloured photographs of the moon's surface, it seems that the colour of the surface actually varies according to the angle from which you see it. Is this so? Does it do this?
Yes, it certainly does.
The wording is appropriate given the structure of the question. Does it do this? Answered by it does. We do note the inclusion of certainly as an unnecessary emphasis.
It's a characteristic that we observe first while traveling around the moon in orbit. You could see that at the terminator.
Rather than saying we saw and the stronger I saw, he only tells us what they could see at this point. What causes this weak assertion? Why does this historical and spectacularly unique event not yet produce a personal response from the subject?
At the boundary between the black part of the moon and the lighted part of the moon, it was as if you were looking at a television set with the contrast turned to full contrast.
Here he uses the universal you, second person, that is more likely used in commonly experienced issues, such as a television set contrast. Still, however, the lack of personal connection linguistically raises the question of personal impact upon the subject. What follows next is distancing language.
Very black and very white. As you moved further into the light, there were more and more shades of gray. But as you moved further, such the sun was higher above the horizon, you actually start to see the tans and browns appear, although at a very low level.
This is distancing language, you, but the event described is specific to him and exclusively astronauts. There is nothing universal about the movement described. Whereas the listener can be referred to with the use of a television, the same cannot be said of space travel. Description is in the language, but there is no justification for the distancing use of the pronoun you in a very highly specialized and dramatic personal experience.
Similarly, on the surface of the moon, the same characteristic is evident.
Here there is no pronoun I and no past tense verb. The pronoun I used with the past tense verb is a signal of linguistic commitment. Here, no use of I is also in a sentence where the present tense description is given.
You can see browns if the sun is high enough. Apollo 12, for example, landed while the sun was only 5 degrees above the horizon. So when they arrived, they saw no browns or tans anywhere, only fairly high contrast grays.
He refers back to history and reports what is commonly and already known. The interviewer has asked him specifically for himself of his experiences. This general answer may have caused this next interruption.
But you did.
But yes, I did. The sun was at 11 degrees. And Apollo 12 did also the next day when they arose from their sleeping period and the sun was higher. Of course, then the browns were observable to them.
We finally have the subject speaking for himself. Unfortunately, it is due to an interruption. When he said, yes, I did, we hold to an expectation that he would now include himself, I, and tell us the sensory descriptions that he holds within personal experiential memory. He does not. He went back to history from his previous answer. Therefore, we do not have the linguistic connection that remains expected.
When you were actually walking about on the moon's surface and kicking about a certain amount of dust, did you notice any local colour? And also, were you at all subconsciously worried about the possibility of unsafe areas?
The interviewer presumes he was walking on the moon. We have yet to hear Mr. Armstrong make this claim, or more expectedly, since there is no accusation to the contrary, spoken or unspoken, the linguistic connection.
Well, the color is a puzzling phenomenon on the moon, aside from the characteristics that I've already mentioned. You generally have the impression of being on a desert-like surface with rather light-colored hues. Yet when you look at the material at close range, as if in your hand, you find it's a charcoal gray, in fact, and we were never able to find any things that were very different from that color. I suspect that as we get more and more samples with future flights, we will see that there is, in fact, some color, but the optical properties on the moon are most peculiar.
The theme of distance continues in the description of color. First, he uses the self-reference that I've already mentioned, rather than engage in experiential memory. We note the first reference was also not first-person statement. Next, we note that he avoids telling us what he himself saw by using second-person universal you. You generally have the impression. It is impossible for anyone not there to have this impression, including the interviewer, who did not experience it. We prefer he state without qualification what he saw. He does not. When the pronoun I re-emerges, it is a weak assertion. I suspect that as we get, which is another disconnect from the formula of reliability. First person singular past tense with sensory description.
When you were actually walking about, did you have any difficulty in distance judging? Because I think I heard you say once that far things looked quite near.
Far things look quite near. The topic is sight. The one being interviewed is singular. We look for him to answer with I saw in some form. Sensory is very individual. When it is discussed, one may then say the thoughts or perceptions of another. But here he is interviewed alone and is being asked for first-person eyewitness account. He does not give a first-person singular account.
Yes, we had some difficulties in perception of distance. For example, our television camera, we judged to be from the cockpit of the lunar module only about 50 to 60 feet away, yet we knew that we had pulled it out to the full extension of a 100-foot cable. Similarly, we had difficulty guessing how far the hills out on the horizon might be. The peculiar phenomena is the closeness of the horizon due to the greater curvature of the moon than we have here on Earth, of course 4 times greater, and the fact that it is an irregular surface with crater rims overlying other crater rims. You can't see the real horizon. You're seeing hills that are somewhat closer to you. There was a large crater which we overflew during our final approach, it had hills of the order of 100 feet in height, and we were only 1,100 feet west of that hill, and we couldn't see a 100-foot high hill from 1,100 to 1,200 feet away.
Perception. He does not speak for himself, including in the realm of perception. This is to address the brain's interpretation of what was seen or experienced. He consistently in the interview tells us what we saw, we thought, we perceived, as well as what you saw, and so on. Although many of these topics were likely discussed, he should still be speaking for himself. This use of we is most unexpected. We must now consider that if he is not deceptive, why does he have a reason to join a crowd, even in personal experience and perception?
Did you notice any obvious difference between the far side and the near side as you went round it? I mean, apart from the obvious differences in topography?
No observable differences in color, but then the sun's angle was always somewhat different over there, so it would be difficult to make a general correlation. I would say the topography is the striking change. Of course, as all your viewers know, there are no seas on the far side of the moon, and it's all highlands and high mountains, big craters, so it's strikingly different from the...
The weakness continues. I would say the topography is future conditional tense. Even in this singular opinion, he does not give a reliable connection.
There's just one more thing I'd like to ask you. You're one of the very, very few people, I think, whose opinion on this is really worth having. In fact, there are only 4 of you. Do you think, from your knowledge of the moon, having been there, that it is going to be possible in the foreseeable future to set up scientific bases there on anything like a large scale?
Oh, I'm quite certain that we'll have such bases in our lifetime. Somewhat like the Antarctic stations and similar scientific outposts, continually manned. Although certainly there's the problem of the environment, the vacuum, and the high and low temperatures of day and night. Still in all, in many ways, it's more hospitable than Antarctica might be. There are no storms, no snow, no high winds, no unpredictable weather phenomena that we're yet aware of, and the gravity is a very pleasant kind of place to work in, better than here on Earth. And I think it would be quite a pleasant place to do scientific work, and quite practical.
Mr. Armstrong, thank you very much. And again, let me say what a tremendous honor and privilege it's been to have you with us.
Thank you.
Here we have the use of 2 personal connections, I, with both qualified. The first is, oh, I'm quite certain that we'll have such bases in our lifetime. Here he is not only certain, but calls upon the reinforcement of being quite certain. The second use is with a slight stutter on the pronoun I, which suggests the possibility of increase of nervousness. In analysis, this is called the stuttering I and is used to measure anxiety. We use the pronoun I millions of times in life. The brain's efficiency is extreme in this regard. When a non-stutterer halts or stutters on the pronoun I, the commitment psychologically comes into question, with nervousness possibly moving into anxiety and tension. He moves the topic to Antarctica, which is similar to going to another Apollo mission above. Yet we ask, what topic produced the stutter on the pronoun I, the emotion produced regarding a space station? And I think it would be quite a pleasant place to do scientific work and quite practical. The emotion he relates to the future station is pleasant for a specific reason, to do scientific work. Why might this create nervousness or even stress? Okay, so Peter Hyatt now gives his conclusions. He says, Neil Armstrong does not linguistically connect himself to the lunar landing. This is evident in his consistent distancing language, including intuitive pronouns and passivity. What may have caused this? So Peter Hyatt now gives 4 possibilities. Remember, he's a professional analyst, so he's covering his bases here with these 4 possible reasons. You'll see in a moment why I'm saying that. So the first possibility is that there is a security mandate. So Neil Armstrong's being told, you're not allowed to tell anyone about what you saw, right? The second is that this is his baseline. So in other words, he talks like this all the time, even when he's talking to his wife. So say his wife said, Neil, did you enjoy yourself at the pub? He would say, when you go to the pub, you do enjoy yourself if you have a beer with your friends. He goes around talking like that, right? So I don't put much credibility in option 2. Option 3, he's a liar. He's deceptive. Lack of commitment mimics deceptive language. The lack of personal commitment in context is stark. Like I say, Peter Hyatt obviously didn't want to put all his eggs in one basket. The 4th is unknown. Okay, so he's hedging his bets a little bit. But I know where my belief lies there. Personally, I think it's number 3. I don't think Neil Armstrong walked on the lunar surface. And you've also got to bear in mind here that Peter Hyatt is an American who completely believed the Apollo story. He wasn't aware of any conspiracy stuff before he did this analysis. So this is a 100% believer. Okay? So in his emails with me after he did this analysis, this is what he said. This was so unexpected that I ran it by another analyst. I grew up at age 7 with his account. There's a strong emotional connection with childhood national pride. The teachers repeatedly visited it, including newsreels. I did not expect this. I originally felt guilty wasting your money. Your money. But after the first few answers where he is linguistically nowhere to be found, I realized that there is more here than what is ridiculed. Heather too, that's his wife, who was also a trained analyst, is shocked. We both said the same thing. Things we dismissed as crazy years ago have been proven true more and more. We need to stay more open and explore.